Going live now. Here we hear music and okay. All right. Thank you and welcome to our second segment of the day. Welcome to City Talk, our Desert Valley's live City Talk. I am joined today by David Saint-Amand, a generational citizen of our community, and not by age, but I know you're it was your father, right? That worked for years on this issue, and David currently is an elected member of the IWV Water Board and a how many year member of the Rotary?
21 years.
Yeah, this is I always am amazed by when I talk to so many of the different citizens of the community. You get into something in this town, you stick.
Yeah.
17 years with the Creighton for me. If you said 21 years with Rotary, I would have guessed it would have been 40. In terms of I know how dedicated you are to it and how much it means to you. I always say that people get into stuff in this town, they sit.
Yes, they do, and it's an amazing organization and very widespread.
And I think you're working on something right now.
Well, I'm going to give you a plug for that.
Hey, there we go.
So over the last 30 years, the Rotary Club of China Lake has given out over $250,000 in scholarships to local area high school graduates. Yeah, sure. Sorry. We've given out over $250,000 in scholarships to the local high school graduates, Trona, Mesquite, Emmanuel Christian, and Burroughs High School.
Yeah, so the dollars for scholars.
Dollars? Well, we can't call it that anymore.
Oh, you can't?
No, because somebody's copyrighted that. But we do call it our Rotary Club of China Lake Annual Scholarship Auction.
Annual scholarship auction.
And that's ongoing online right now. Look in the Daily Independent for last Saturday, you'll see our ad, and if you look at the front of the swap sheet, you'll see that ad as well, and it'll give you the website. We've got all sorts of good stuff to
So who was first, China Lake Museum or you in terms of the infamous auction model of Ridgecrest?
Oh, Lord, I don't know.
I don't know either, but...
So what usually happens is somebody has a great idea, and all the other service clubs jump on it.
That's what I was going for,
Yeah.
is the... I will still remember when I first came to the community, I hadn't experienced the type of massive auction that the China Lake Museum did late 2000s.
Yes.
They were
huge.
They were unbelievably large.
Yep.
And
very successful.
Very, very successful. But, quietly, you had one that was done by the Mataranka Museum, by Rotary, RAA.
Fire Mountain Foundation.
Fire Mountain Foundation. And one of the cool things about this community is those auctions. When my wife, when we've had our first son, we went to the Rotary one. Rotary auction is one of her favorites.
Thank you.
Matarango is her second.
Okay.
Not probably because of what's at Matarango, but because she loves to see the kids run around and she likes the ticket aspect of them.
Yeah.
And the kids love the idea of winning something. But I know Dollars for Scholars has been huge for you for so many years, and let me just again express what citizens of this community should do so much often. Thank you. $250,000 back in our community of scholarships. And more importantly is I think you're a great example, and I think Rotary is a great example of what how ideas spread. Mm-hmm. So Desert Valley's, we started a foundation back in 2013 that we haven't done a lot with, but what we've been able to do is through employee contributions and creating, we've got a nest egg of about $40,000 that we've started to do scholarships and things like that
nice.
with. And so if you haven't seen on our Facebook page, check it out. There's a scholarship application that just posted recently. And thank you for everything you do for students in this community. So
it's our pleasure. The club enjoys that, and it's our major event for the
year. I'm not a Rotarian, but I'm out to promote them.
Well, we meet every Wednesday on Zoom, so please come.
That's my challenge. That's my challenge. I have been recruited so many times, and I would love to serve another club. Catch me in 16 and a half years. As in when Grace gets to 18, because I got in this bad habit where I kept having kids. And I keep telling my wife, you keep resetting the clock. I thought I was halfway there, and then you keep resetting it. So I in my future life, I promise to give back to Rotarians, because I think you guys are fantastic.
You're already giving back to the
organization.
community.
Well, I'm working right now. So I asked David to come on. Tell me some of the background. Tell me the Saint-Amand history.
Okay,
with water.
Happy to do that, but first I have to say this. I am an employee of the Naval Air Systems Command and a member of the Water Board here at the Indian Wells Valley Water District. And what I say today is my opinion. It does not reflect necessarily the opinion of the Board of Directors, and certainly does not reflect the opinion of the United States Navy. I don't represent them. I cannot represent them, and I cannot present to them as well. So
the opinions I present are only behalf of Eric Bruin and not the entire Ridgecrest City Council.
Exactly.
As well as, however, I can represent Desert Valley's Federal Credit Union. It's my only one I can.
There you go.
Until my board tells me otherwise.
It's all very nice, and we've made some lawyers a little bit happier by saying those things. But really, these are my opinions.
I know. Yeah. Appreciate that.
So my folks, my father went to Caltech on the GI Bill in the late 40s and 50s. He got himself a doctorate, and while he was down there, he came up and did geophysical experiments out on the North Ranges, one of which was measuring the light generated by the night sky. So you look up at night and you see all the nice stars, but very faintly around them, that the high altitude atmosphere actually generates its own light as well, chemical reactions and so forth. So then he went away for a couple of years and got a Fulbright scholarship and studied in Paris, and then was loaned out by the Navy to the State Department. And he went down to Chile and Santiago and started university in Santiago, Chile. Not started the university, I'm sorry, started the geology department down there.
Okay.
Helped them put it together, and was there for their big earthquake, I think 58 or 57, and wrote the report on it, because one of the things the State Department had him do was go and fly up and down the length of Chile to see where they needed the most help. And that gave him an opportunity to do his geological work all up and down.
Understand the
country.
distance, yeah.
Yep, absolutely. One of the papers on it. Came back to the Valley, eventually head of the Earth and Planetary Sciences Division here in town and on base, and he produced a number of geologic papers on the regional geology and hydrology of the valley. Helped start up a couple of local service organizations and
started a bunch of. I mean, your father's reputation in the community huge, and you got it was water and geology and all of that just pass, just natural pass.
Well, I had a knack for it.
I have a knack for credit unions, and I know the feeling.
Okay.
My dad was a CEO for a credit union for 30 years, so I know what it means to be a generational son.
It is. Yeah, and nothing wrong with it.
Absolutely not.
So he was on the Water District Board of Directors for a couple of decades, and we were geology consultants together in the early 90s. We did seismic safety studies based on if you had a house that was in an Alcos Priolo special studies zone, you had to get somebody to come in and take a look at it and map the fault and determine where you could safely build a house or other structure that wasn't smack dab on top of the fault, and we did that for a little bit.
I had during the campaign period, one of the best ideas I heard was, why doesn't Ridgecrest have a geology annex to a university?
That's an excellent question. We've applied several times for colleges and universities that the state was promoting as a new university, and put in our application as a community, and we've never yet
been able to
pull in a major university like that.
I got a feeling there's 2 geological events that occurred on July 4th and 5th that we might be able to use to leverage some support, hopefully at some point. You know,
well, I think they're just happy that they've instrumented the valley.
That I would say, I would imagine from a geological perspective, that entire month period was extraordinarily unique in the patterns.
Yeah. Well, yes and no. What was unique about it is this: they had the magnitude 5, which everybody thought had destroyed the town. It turned out it didn't. And I know I could feel it other people could as well. The ground hadn't settled down. It felt like there was an energy in the air that was building up over the 4th until we had our big one on magnitude 7.
On the 5th.
Right. And but the nice thing is everybody from all of the universities in the area, probably even Nevada, rushed out here with seismometers and began jamming them in the ground because they wanted to pick up the patterns from the aftershocks. What they didn't know, excuse me, now I got a tickle because I'm talking, is that was just the foreshock for the big one. And so they actually had probably the best instrumented major earthquake ever
in history. Oh, that's a very interesting. I have said I've been, one of my big, things has been just what a blessing the earthquakes actually have been to this community in terms of not only what it's going to do for the base, but also in terms of timing and how it's played out for COVID. But we've rattled on, so I'm gonna let you talk a little bit about. We know we have a water issue. What's your perspective on where the valley's future is for water, where the valley's necessities are for water? I'm not water. We were talking about water stupid. I'm not water stupid, but I'm not water educated, and that's what I've learned. It is a complex, highly complex issue.
Yes.
Combined with a Hatfield versus McCoy's level of legality.
Oh yeah, just the water law in California alone is confusing beyond belief.
Oh yeah.
So the most fundamental point about the water in the valley is that it's a closed basin. There are people who believe it's an open basin, that water flows in an underground river under our feet. That is not true. There's no geologic evidence to support that. And interestingly enough, the division of opinion tends to be those that wish to continue on pumping with water as if nothing was ever going to go bad. They tend to believe it's an open basin, or at least they're proponents of the open basin theory.
Right. And there's absolutely no evidence to support that.
No. Now, I've heard people say they were there at a well drilling where they could feel the pipe bending from the force of the water. I think the well was down hundreds of feet, if not 1,000 feet, and I doubt you could feel the pipe bending. So they experienced something. I don't know what it was, but it's not an rushing underground river.
It could have been Loch Ness grabbing a hold of it and pulling it at the same time.
He's in Scotland.
Okay.
His brother, Ogopogo, is in Canada by Lake Egmonton. Yeah. Yes.
It was Bigfoot. Yeah. It was social distancing, 1,000 feet underground, just pulling
up. Yeah, Bigfoot's a master of that.
Yeah. And the basin is a wide area. The basin is
it's huge.
I mean, we in our brains, we go, well, that's just right here.
Right.
No, it's not. The basin is, what's the geographical boundaries generally of the basin?
Most people, they go outside, you look north, you see the highway, or where the highway is, running up through the Little Lake Gap. The basin goes all the way up to there.
Okay.
If you're turning, looking at the base, all of those hills in the background, those are all the edge of the basin. You can see Bee Mountain's the one edge of the basin, but what we often don't consider is that when you slip around the side of Bee Mountain now, that's a little bit of basin there as well, where the bedrock rises up. That's where the basin ends. Anything south of us, those mountains are all on the edge of the basin, and our basin extends down past Robber's Roost down to Red Rock Canyon.
Yeah,
that's all in our basin.
I was going to guess it was going to go as far down as like Red Rock.
It does,
and that's because it's a largely level area. That's.
Well, there's actually a big. So if you're at Red Rock, there's the valley goes north, and then suddenly the rock drops, and we have a kind of a sub basin within the Indian Wells Valley. And some water comes from the Red Rock area down to us, but not a lot. A bunch of it actually drains out Red Rock Canyon.
Okay.
To the south.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That does make a lot of sense when you think about how geology also, you can look at rocks and you can see there's some historical evidence of how water ran through an area at some point before. And we know China Lake, is a dry lake bed, but we know at some point.
Right. Series of Pleistocene lakes.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason that they call it a lake at some point. It was a water basin at some point in time in geological history. And that would make sense that Red Rock Canyon would be geologically defined by typically a water flow of some kind. Yeah. That's interesting.
It's interesting.
I never actually thought of it that way. That's a great way of just putting the basin into perspective
in a broad
perspective. Yeah. Now I know there's been I call it the Southwest Hope Well.
Yeah.
That's that's going closer down that area, going further towards Red Rock
Yes.
Canyon, and hoping that there's some additional water resources. That's the hope, essentially,
Right.
of different parts of the debate.
So there's two important things about that. And the first is that there can be all sorts of water in that part of our valley. We don't have a lot of wells there. It'd be nice to have access to it. But that doesn't get us out from under the state law that says you have to be in balance. The number that we come up with for recharge is based on the water that flows into the entire basin. And previous geologic studies suggest that it was around 10,000 acre feet. Recent studies and the Groundwater Authority are setting that figure down closer to 72, I can't remember the exact number, 7,600 acre feet, somewhere in that neighborhood. So there's room for debate in that area, but there's no room for debate in that if we pull water from the southern part of our valley, we are still under requirement by the state to cut our water usage back until we're in sustainability. That won't help us.
We are still overdrafting, and
That's right.
We are beyond sustainability. And I know that pressure, we represent different bodies, which is one of the great conversational pieces is I represent the city, you represent the water district.
Well, here I'm just myself.
But
I sit on the board.
In terms of some of the things that we hear and we talk about, and I don't mean.
I just didn't want to give ammo to some folks.
Yeah, you're cool. You're right. You're right. Like I trust me. If there's anything I've learned over the first 90 days is that Eric's mouth opens up and sticks its foot in it more than anybody else.
That happens.
It's actually March 16th is my 90th day, so I'm doing a spectacular job of sticking my foot in.
Well done.
But one of the challenges I know the water district faces is extraordinary pressure legislatively.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think everybody quite understands how much pressure you guys are being put on from a conservation and a usage perspective. Yeah. I thought maybe you'd be able to give us some perspectives on that.
Well, Governor Schwarzenegger and his successors wanted water districts to start conserving water. So our general manager, Don Zadiba, set a 20% conservation measure, which we've hit. We used to pump 7,400 acre feet roughly a year for the water district. We're now down around 6,400 acre feet. Forgive me if I can't remember the exact number. So there's been a major reduction. That's not the water district. That's the people in Indian Wells Valley, particularly the city of Ridgecrest and the boundaries of the water district, which also includes unincorporated area, making a concerted effort to cut back.
Yeah, using zero-scapes and doing. There has been, I would say, definitely an increased conservation effort.
Yes. So we've got the desire of the state to conserve water, and we've got a desire by the water district to try to live within our means and to try to find a way to move forward with some of the restrictions that the Groundwater Authority is putting on different organizations and some of the fees that are being assessed as a result of that.
And they're definitely a challenge.
Oh, they're absolutely a challenge. So there was an article recently in the News and Review. I really want to address it at this point. That talks about all of the fees that are levied against various pumping entities that are responsible to pay them. And in the article, they say that the water districts must be 6,500 acre feet, and they're going to pay this much. And they have a really large number that they say we're going to be paying the Groundwater Authority. It's an interesting article, but they make an incorrect assumption. We're only required to pay the fee on any water that exceeds the allocation that the water district have, which is something a little bit north of 4,000 acre feet. So it works out to about $4 million a year in new fees. That's both the recharge fee, or the water replenishment fee, and the pumping fee, and they're all piled together. This month, if you have a water district bill, you will see a Groundwater Authority fees column. It has all of the fees the Groundwater Authority charges called out, so that people understand that isn't just suddenly a major jump in their water bill, but there's a reason for that, and that reason is to support the Groundwater Authority and to support what efforts they have to try to bring additional water into the valley.
Yeah, it's about water resource. I'm going to have you pull your mic just a little bit further closer, David.
Oh, am I? Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Normally, you can't get me to be quiet.
I have the same problem, don't worry. But the fact is that even these, most of these steps, these are, they've been controversial steps, but at the end of the day, these are all steps towards, combining to get the basin imbalance.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think the biggest thing that we're all fighting over how we get there. But at the end of the day, we still have to get there. That's a mandate. That's
By
not
state law.
That's not something. And as I understand, the water district is you guys have done a 20% reduction in terms of conservation efforts. But there's if I remember that there's something that they want you to get down to. I mean, it's a pretty crazy number.
You've touched on it, and this is important. And I don't think that it's widely known by the public, but the state has passed a couple of laws that mandate, I think by 2024, people are going to have to be restricted to 55 gallons per day per person, and so per capita. And then they want to move that down to 50 gallons per day per capita in terms of water use. On top of that, there's going to be an allotment that accommodates outside landscaping. So you might get however many gallons they're willing to give you. And our particular problem in the valley here is that in the summer months, we often use evaporative coolers to keep our houses livable.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of people who've had evaporative coolers forever. They can't afford to switch over to air conditioning. And it's so our general manager is involved in some organizations, and he's working with state level committees to try to encourage people to take a look at what the use is in given areas, to give them a little bit more
adjustment. Now, right now, what was the average person use in the
about
valley
98 gallons per person?
About 98 gallons. So put that into perspective for the audience. Right now, one person household uses roughly 98 gallons a day.
On average.
And we have not just, this is really important. It's not the water district saying you must. But this is state legislation that's indicating you have to be down to 55 gallons per person per day. That just to put that into perspective, that's nearly a 50% drop.
Yeah, that's 10 toilet flushes.
10 toilet flushes a day?
Yep.
Wow, okay.
That's all.
So, I mean,
so this is,
I you know what I want to say, and I'm just gonna do it because it's who I am. If it's brown, flush it down. If it's yellow, let it mellow. Got it.
That's their idea.
I mean, I'm not gonna change who I am for the sake of live stream. But the fact is that they desperately they're gonna make conservation even harder on every single citizen, regardless of, we can sit here and debate fees, but legislatively, the pressure is on the district to conserve even more drastically is a hard-pressed issue coming at this community.
Yes, and this, of all the things going on, including the Groundwater Authority and the water usage in the valley, this is probably the most critical. So in San Francisco and Los Angeles, the estimates are that as much as 40% of the water that goes into their system is lost through leaks. So I think that this is one of the motivations behind this law is to force the major cities to recapitalize and repair their water distribution systems, which were put in over 100 years ago and have not seen major repairs. The cities can't afford to do that. It's not going to happen. Right. They're going to either have to have huge infusions of cash, or they're going to go.
We'll just look for another stimulus.
Right. And if you go to, great. So then you get money, the government borrows money, inflation goes up, and then your savings become useless. So
trust me, I get it.
Inflation is a tax on savings.
Stimulus is an accounts payable.
If you give me $10, Eric, I'll give you $2 back as stimulus.
Absolutely.
All right? That'll make sure you get to stimulate the economy. So the state's doing this. They think that people are going to cut with their water use way back. You don't have to shower every day. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. It can be Navy showers, but what they'll end up doing is driving businesses out of the state, because you're going to have to restrict water usage at restaurants, and they use a lot of water. Hotels use a lot of water. Individual people who will quit cleaning themselves because they can't use more than 50 gallons a day will start to develop skin diseases that you don't see in the U.S., but you will, because this is an unintended consequence of this idea. The root of the problem is this. It's not that you're using more than 2 oil drums of water a day. It's that since the 1980s, the population of the state has either doubled or tripled, and they have built no new water collection and storage systems. And in fact, have been actively either ignoring them and letting them decay, or have been tearing them down.
And that includes water storage from from a rain perspective. That
Right.
includes desal. That includes any one of these options. There's probably 5 decades of negligence on behalf of the state
Easily.
easily in
Right.
terms of understanding how the state has grown and where our water resources are. And that leads us to where we're at today, which is, again, an unintended consequence,
Right.
whether it be a groundwater authority fee to be able to acquire water, or it be, some type of action that the water district, I mean, how is the water district going to control something like that?
They can't.
Can they control it through cost?
We don't know how many people are living in a house, so we can't go directly to the customer
Okay.
and tell them, you guys have 2 people in the house and you're using 60 gallons of water. Knock it off. Or 110 gallons. So we can't do that. That's not going to be for us to do. Right. We've got people who are using evaporative coolers. We can't tell them to stop doing that.
Fair.
Right. So there's those things are out of the way. The city, we have no ability to pass regulations about landscaping. The city,
Not that the city and the water
city
district
could.
would not obviously
Right.
have a supportive goal towards that if necessary.
right, but that isn't even going to solve the problem
No.
because we're conserving water remarkably well now in the valley. We see people converting over to xeriscape, as you were talking about earlier, and we've already gotten a 20% savings, and now we have to start cutting back on how much water
Yeah, I mean,
people are going to use in their house.
If we did 20% savings already, this is close to 40% of what our original use was. I mean, if you go further back. So, what happens when citizens? I mean, actually, we'll leave that for another conversation a couple years down the line, because I know you're legislatively advocating for changes, and I want to make sure that the public hears. The water board, I know, is working. The entire district is working hard on this issue. This is not something that's just showing up tomorrow.
The issue is at state level.
Yeah.
The state has said what the messages they're giving across is we have focused on the needs only a small constituency. And as a result, we have neglected the interests of the state at large to deal with the fact that our state uses more water than we have in our systems or can distribute through our systems. And so we're going to make you use less water. So what is going to happen is that the people that can leave the state are going to leave the state because they're not going to want to live under those conditions. And the people that can't move are going to be stuck here, and they're going to suffer under those ridiculous circumstances. Well, Mr. Saint-Amand, where are we going to get the water from? Well, the pattern in California is it's 3 years of drought and 2 years of floods. Now, so there's some variation, right? But on average, that's what it looks like. We know that from tree rings, from trees that people have harvested. We know that from written historical documents. So during those 2 flood years, we have a lot of water rushing into the Pacific Ocean. Some of that could be
Needs to be
tapped
stored.
and could be stored. And there are a number of ways of doing that other than making a dam and flooding a valley.
No, you can actually store it. Underground water storage is
Yep.
as I understand, is made leaps and bounds comparative to what it
Used to,
was.
yes. And you can still get enough water to cover the state's water needs and allow for the transport of sediment and the sustainment of the beaches and all that other stuff that's all tied into how much water rushes out in the ocean.
Yeah, and the fact is that we know there's water. We know that California existed long before there was a state legislation or anything else. So we know there's a capability of existence. We have to start finding a way to balance both the legislative along with our actual reality.
Right. Nobody wants to live in a hellhole. We have to
No.
find a way to deal with these issues.
And we're about 5 minutes off from where we usually cut off, but
Okay.
I could talk with you for a couple hours, but what do you think is the number one thing that the public doesn't understand about the water issue, that there's just I can talk to my neighbor and my neighbor gives me the telephone story, and then his neighbor gave him the telephone story, and by the time you get down 10 people, the story is just completely wrong relative to what's really happening.
Okay. There's a number of issues that I don't know that are well understood. The water district has delivered reliably high-quality water for a reasonable price for a very long time, and we're not anywhere close to some of the costs that you see in places like San Diego.
We've
Los
actually
Angeles.
gotten our water for a very long period of time at a very reasonable cost.
Yes, that's
Is that-
right.
I
Yeah.
mean,
And
I
that's,
mean,
yeah, absolutely.
for everyone who wants to argue about, the fact is that Ridgecrest does exist in the state of California. The state of California is more expensive across the board,
Everything, absolutely.
everywhere. But Ridgecrest itself and the water district has worked very hard to keep those costs reasonable for a very long extended period of time.
Right. And those costs are going to go up as a result of actions taken by the Groundwater Authority, of a seat in that committee in which the water district has a representative. And there's the water district is only gets one vote, and they vote as the best they can, and the increases in costs are coming whether the water district wanted them or not.
Right.
And that's an important thing. Really, a lot of people conflate the water district with the Groundwater Authority, and they are not the same
They are not.
organization.
Yeah, because the city has one representative.
Yep.
The water district has a representative. The counties have a representative.
Kern, San Bernardino, and Inyo counties all have a rep on there.
Yeah, because the basin touches all three.
Absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely.
you know, there can be a lot of debate about what their potential overreach of authority is, but at the end of the day, the need of the Groundwater Authority was not something that any one of those agencies had an option on.
Right.
It was
No, you either formed your own or the state would form one for you.
the very important point.
Yes.
Is one of the confusing points is that I've heard from the neighbor line is, well, they just put this organization in place to find fees, and that's so far from accurate. We were told each of these agencies wasn't given again, this is legislative action, not
Law of the land.
law of the land, not we want to do this because now there's a good argument that I've heard or I personally believe in, which is one of the things that the community fails to recognize or be good about taking their own accountability on is we got to some of the positions we got into because of our own negligence and our own kicking of the can.
Yes.
There's a fact in there. We don't want to ever, people hate to ever say, well, no, we didn't do that. Yeah, we did. As a community, I've always used the line, guys, it's a desert.
Yeah.
In case you didn't notice, you live in a desert. There's a reason why the definition of desert says a land without water.
Yes. How much rain falls in a year is what qualifies you as a desert.
You know what I'm trying
That's
to
what- I know, and that's what we are living in.
we lived in it, and and at some point we were going to pay a piper. And I think that's one of the things that I stress in my communications. We're paying the piper.
We can either, so they've known since like 1905 from the first geology report that the wells were already being drawn down back then. It was a fairly substantial farming operation and community in the valley at that time. And it hasn't gotten any better. So I am a private well owner within the boundaries of the water district. And the well that I have, along with the co-owners, is dropping about 10 inches a year. I've been able to figure that. In 2016 is able to do the calculation. And the water table is dropping, and there is not an infinite amount of water. And if we don't deal with it now, then everybody who owns property in the valley 10 years, 50 years, 100 years from now is going to be faced with a situation where there isn't enough potable groundwater to sustain the population, and their property becomes worthless.
Not just sustain the population, sustain, I know you can't say this, but I can. It's also sustain the mission at China Lake, sustain the economic benefits that this community has, sustain some of the things that I know has drawn you and me both to make this our home are at stake here. And I think that's one of the big reasons why we have to represent a certain amount of our own accountability to it. That we did kick this can down the line, and as a community, we have a responsibility for making the changes to start to correct the problem. It's not going to solve the problem,
Right.
but begin the corrective process. It's going to take decades before it'll be solved.
That's right. If ever. And it's not the entire state it's not just us, it's the entire state of California. The state has a plan to fallow over a third of the farmland in the San Joaquin Valley, just to fallow it. And one of the economic engines in the good old days, timber, fishing, the movie industry, farming and mining were what made and actual heavy industry what made California the prosperous state it was in. Well, heavy industry's gone, been replaced with technology sectors in the Bay Area.
Silicon, yeah.
But fishing is virtually gone. Lumber is in retreat. It's very difficult to start a new
Mining
mine.
is very minimal.
And now we're going to take farming away, and what's going to leave us with an economic base that is essentially Silicon Valley. And people are already fleeing Silicon Valley now. Companies are leaving the state of California. The issue is we have to pay more attention to what's going on at our state level and hold the politicians who are in power accountable for the decisions they're making.
It was a
We
great
have to speak
conversation.
louder to them than other constituencies, which have been speaking to them and giving them money for decades. People have to stand up and say, hey, hold on. You have to serve all of the people of California, not just a few special interest groups. When are you guys going to start making decisions that's going to help everybody? So rainfall, we're mining water. It doesn't matter whether it's a dry year or a wet year. We have the water we got that fell in the mountains 10,000 years ago. We're pumping that out. That doesn't do us any good. But the rest of the state, they can make a huge improvement in the conditions across the rest of the state, out in the non-desert regions, just by changing a few state policies.
Absolutely.
And maintaining some of those water structures.
Yeah, and an economy that was built. I love the conversation of advocacy. So that was spectacular. Well, I'm not going to let it go too long because we go about 40 minutes.
All right.
David, first and foremost, thanks for coming out.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being part of City Talk, and we would welcome you back. And what I mean by that is if you want to have another conversation about some things that change at the Water District, please come on back. The goal of this is to bring information to you, the public, and through the credit union. This is information that I think so often just gets mixed up. And thank you so much, David, for coming and being a part of it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been enjoyable.
I appreciate it
with you.
immensely.
Yeah.
Okay, and with that, we will see you at our next City Talk, which is April, I believe, 6th, April 6th. So good evening, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Farewell.